The account recorded in the book of Genesis 40 verses 1 to 23 takes place in an unexpected setting, a prison. It is not a palace, not an open field, not a moment of victory. It is a place of silence, cold walls, locked doors, and days that all seem the same. And perhaps that is exactly why this part of Joseph's story is so profound, because it shows that many of the most important moments in our lives happen when everything seems to be standing still. Joseph was not there because he had committed a crime. He was imprisoned because of an injustice. After being sold by his own brothers and taken to Egypt, Joseph had gained the trust of his master, Potiphar. But one lie changed everything. Potiphar's wife falsely accused him, and the result was prison. Imagine for a moment what might go through the heart of someone in that situation. Betrayed by his brothers, taken away from his homeland, falsely accused, and now locked inside a prison. How many people, in moments like that, might ask themselves, is God still seeing what is happening to me? Yet something remarkable appears in the narrative. Even inside the prison, the text makes it clear that God continued to be with Joseph. The environment was dark, but God's presence had not disappeared. As time passed, Joseph did not become just another forgotten prisoner. The man in charge of the prison began to trust him. That alone reveals something about Joseph's character. Even in difficult circumstances, he did not become bitter. He did not decide to live in anger or give up. Instead, he continued to be someone trustworthy. Then one day, 2 new prisoners arrive. These were not ordinary men. One was Pharaoh's cupbearer, the man responsible for serving wine to the king. The other was the chief baker, responsible for preparing the food of the royal court. Both had somehow displeased Pharaoh and were thrown into prison. Now imagine the scene. The prison was probably a damp place, with the smell of stone and earth, guards walking back and forth, chains clinking, heavy wooden doors closing. And there, among men forgotten by the world, were 2 officials who once lived inside the palace. Then, one night, something happens. Both men have dreams. In the Bible, dreams sometimes carry important messages. But at that time, just like today, dreams could also cause anxiety and confusion. That is exactly what happened. When Joseph saw them the next morning, he noticed something different about their faces. They looked troubled. So Joseph asked a simple but very human question. Why you look so sad today? That question may seem small, but it reveals something important about Joseph's heart. He was also a prisoner. He also had reasons to be sad, yet he still noticed the pain of others. This leads us to an important reflection. How often are we so focused on our own problems that we fail to notice the suffering of the people around us? The 2 men explained that they had dreams, but there was no one there to interpret them. In the ancient world, the interpretation of dreams was taken very seriously. Kings often consulted wise men and advisors. But inside that forgotten prison, there was no expert to help them. Then Joseph said something that revealed the foundation of his faith. Do not interpretations belong to God? Notice the confidence in that statement. Joseph does not point to himself as someone special. Instead, he points to God. It is as if he is saying, if there is meaning in these dreams, God can reveal it. First, the cupbearer tells his dream. He describes a vine in front of him with 3 branches. The vine begins to bud, blossoms appear, and clusters of ripe grapes grow. He takes the grapes, squeezes them into Pharaoh's cup, and places the cup in the king's hand. Joseph listens carefully and then explains the meaning. The 3 branches represent 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh would restore the cupbearer to his position. He would once again serve wine to the king, just as he had done before. But Joseph makes a request to the cupbearer, a simple request filled with hope. Remember me when things go well for you. Mention me to Pharaoh so that I may be released from his prison. It was a reasonable request. Joseph knew he was there unjustly. Perhaps this would be his opportunity for freedom. When the baker heard that the interpretation of the first dream was positive, he decided to tell his dream as well. In his dream, there were 3 baskets of bread on his head. In the top basket were all kinds of food prepared for Pharaoh. But birds were coming and eating the food. Joseph's interpretation, however, was not positive. Just like the first dream, the 3 baskets represented 3 days. But in this case, within 3 days Pharaoh would order the baker's execution. Joseph did not change the message to make it easier to hear. He spoke what God had revealed, even though it was difficult. Then the third day arrived. It was Pharaoh's birthday. On that day, Pharaoh held a celebration and ordered the cupbearer and the baker to be brought from the prison. Exactly as Joseph had said, the cupbearer was restored to his position, and the baker was executed. Everything happened exactly as the dreams had indicated. But the story does not end with Joseph being released. The biblical text adds a short but powerful statement. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Think about that for a moment. Joseph had helped that man. He interpreted his dream. He gave him hope. And he asked for only one thing, that he remember him before Pharaoh. But when the cupbearer returned to the comfort of palace life, he forgot. How often does something like that happen in real life? People receive help during difficult moments and later continue their lives as if nothing ever happened. Perhaps Joseph waited day after day. Maybe he thought, today someone will call for me. Today Pharaoh has heard about me. But the days passed, and nothing happened. Joseph remained in prison. This moment in the story raises some deep questions. What do we do when we do something good, and no one recognizes it? What happens inside our hearts when the help we give is forgotten? Do we continue doing what is right even when there is no immediate reward? Joseph's life teaches us something very important here. Even when people forget, God does not forget. Even when doors seem to remain closed, God is still working behind the scenes. At that moment in the story, Joseph did not know it yet. But that very act of being forgotten would become part of something much greater. If he had been released at that moment, perhaps his story would have ended in a very ordinary way. But God was preparing something extraordinary. The prison was not the end of Joseph's story. It was only a stage. This leads us to reflect on something very common in human life: the season of waiting. We live in a culture that wants quick answers, immediate solutions, instant results. But many of the greatest transformations in life happen during quiet seasons, when it seems like nothing is happening. Joseph's prison was actually a place of preparation. There he learned to deal with people. There he showed faithfulness in difficult circumstances. There he gained the trust of others. And all of that would be essential for the future God had planned. So an important question arises for anyone reading this story today. Could the difficult moments of our lives also be preparing us for something we cannot yet see? There may be seasons in life that seem unfair. Moments when we are misunderstood, forgotten, or even betrayed. But Joseph's story shows that faithfulness during difficult times is never wasted. Nothing that happened to Joseph was in vain. Every injustice, every silence, every day inside that prison was somehow building the path towards something greater. And perhaps that is one of the greatest lessons of this chapter. God does not work only in moments of victory. Many times, He works behind the scenes of pain, waiting, and apparent injustice. Joseph interpreted dreams in that prison without knowing that one day he would interpret dreams before Pharaoh himself. He helped two prisoners without imagining that this moment would become part of a story that would eventually change the destiny of an entire nation. And that brings us to one final reflection. How many opportunities to do good appear in simple and unexpected moments? Joseph could have ignored those two men. He could have said, "I'm suffering too. Solve your own problems." But he chose to help, even inside a prison, even in the middle of his own pain. And sometimes, that is exactly how God begins to transform stories. Through small acts of faithfulness, in unlikely places, in moments that seem insignificant. Joseph's prison looked like the end of his story. But in reality, it was only the beginning of something much greater.
If this story spoke to your heart, don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel and follow every chapter of the Bible told as powerful, easy to understand stories. Leave a like, share with someone who needs to hear this message, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episodes. See you in the next chapter.